Hello, I am Professor Sayari. I wanna say a study on the burnt offering in the Old Testament. I wanna say first the book Leviticus. Leviticus tells how Israel should live as a worshiping community and records the rules of everyday life. It records also the various sacrifices and the ordinances of everyday life that God's people need to maintain right relationship with God. It contains religious ordinances and regulations for feasts and sacrifices of the Old Testament, including burnt offering, meal offering, peace offering, sin offering, compensation offering, and other feasts. Passover, Feast of Weeks, Feast of Booths, Sabbath, and Jubilee. It is burnt offering that appears first in the book of Leviticus, 5 greatest sacrifices. This paper examines the provisions and theological features of burnt offerings in the Old Testament and examines how they can be applied to modern churches and society. In the Old Testament, Solomon is very often referred to as king of region and wealth, or king of wisdom. The riches of the time of Solomon as king of wealth are expressed as follows. All King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's day. Solomon, as the king of wisdom, makes wonderful judgments on the basis of wisdom from God. He also imported wisdom literature from neighboring countries through frequent international exchanges with foreign countries and began a wisdom literary tradition in Israel. Thus, he became known as the most wise king of the Bible. King Solomon developed international activities based on David's established kingship and powerful relational power. The wisdom literature of the countries of the ancient Near East around Israel was pushed into Israel by the door of internationalization held in Solomon's time. At that time, Solomon wrote many wisdom literary works and left his reputation as the founder of the wisdom literature of Israel. In this sense, the wisdom literature, especially the Proverbs, carry most international character of the Old Testament. According to Leviticus chapter 1, God called Moses at the tent of meeting and passes through Moses the laws for worship to people of Israel. At this time, the tent of meeting is the place of revelation, and the Israelites meet together in the tent of meeting to worship God. At this time, the tent of meeting is a place to worship God. God speaks of the burnt offering first in this tent of meeting. The burnt offering is the most representative of the various sacrifices of the Old Testament. It is a sacrifice to the Lord by burning all offerings without giving to priests. The Hebrew word olah, which is a burnt offering, is derived from the word Allah, which means ascend, and expresses the appearance of fire, smoke, and fragrance rise up to God. In the Old Testament times, there were occasions when a number of sacrifices were offered together, usually with the burnt offerings first. The characteristic of this burnt offering is that all of the sacrifices offered are burned in all, but the dirty parts to be thrown out. This type of sacrifices were already prevalent in the ancient Near East. There are two kinds of burnt offerings, one for the morning and for the evening offerings of the priests. At the time of the Exodus, the Israelites had to sacrifice a sheep for burnt offering every morning and evening at the tent of meeting in the wilderness. Another is the general burnt offering offered by an individual, which allows the individual to offer burnt offering when he atones his faults and desires God's grace. The man who offered the sacrifice laid his hands on the beast's head. By doing so, he expresses his willingness to give some or all of himself to God with the beast. The offerings were identified with those who were offered sacrifice through ordination. In other words, if the sacrifice is to die, the person is to die. And the sacrifice to God is to give himself. The priest took the blood and sprinkled it around the altar, and the shedding of blood has a symbolic meaning of returning the life of all sacrificed animals to God. When the fire burns, it is understood that the fragrant smell has been received by God. As such, the anthropomorphism, which God is depicted as a person with a nose like a man, is often found in sacrificial ordinances. The crime of man causes the wrath of God, and the wrath of God brings judgment. The people of Israel, however, turned down the wrath of God by offering burnt offerings, and is exempt from the judgment to be the result of wrath. For God delights in the smoke of the burnt offering and sings his wrath. The priest had to keep the burnt altar out of the fire. Command Aaron and his sons, saying, "This is the law of burnt offering. The burnt offerings shall be on the heart of the altar all night until the morning, and the fire of the altar shall be kept burning on it." The heart of the worshipper versus the size of the offerings. As burnt offerings, males without flour of cattle or sheep were used. To sacrifice flourless offerings is because God wants the integrity of the worshippers. The reason for offering males as sacrifice is to offer the best. This is because in ancient society it gave the male superior value to the female. It may also be due to the practical reason that females must feed and breed. However, it was not easy to give a ram or a goat as a livestock. Therefore, those who offer cattle, sheep, and goats as males are comparatively economically affordable. Birds were allowed only as sacrifices offered by the poor. If a man wants to bring a bird as a burnt offering, then he shall offer his offering of turtle doves or of young pigeons. The ancient Israelites raised such birds at home. In the case of birds, the feature is that the distinction between male and female is imperceptible and the size of the offering is so small. Unlike the case of cattle, sheep, and goats, the sacrifice of birds is done by priests without the participation of the Israelites. This is probably because the offering was small, so it was for the convenience of the priest alone. After the birth of Jesus in the New Testament, Joseph and Mary climbed up to Jerusalem to give the firstborn to God. The sacrifice of the doves at this time tells us that the family was poor. And to offer sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Cases in the Old Testament after the flood, Genesis 8. The word burnt offering in the Old Testament first appeared immediately after the flood of Noah's time. The first thing Noah did when he came out of the ark was to take sacrifices among all the clean beasts and birds. He did sacrifices to God with them. Noah's burnt offering has 2 meanings. One is a gratitude for the grace of God saving from the flood judgment, and the other is asking God for grace for the future of his new life. After burnt offering, God gave new grace to the world of creation. It is that God does not curse the earth because of man again. In response to the burnt offering of man, Noah, God promised to be faithful to the world forever. Generally, sacrifices in the ancient Near East were done for 2 purposes. It is first to appease God by offering sacrifices, and second, to provide food to God. The burnt offering in the Old Testament also has meaning of relieving God's wrath. Noah's burnt offering was the same, and the offering that David has the same meaning. David relieved the wrath of God, which was caused by the census by offering burnt offerings. Abraham, in Genesis 22, Abraham's attempt to offer Isaac as a burnt offering is the most dramatic worship scene in the Old Testament. Here, Abraham took just the trees, the fire, and the sword to be used in the burnt offering. Isaac says to Abraham, "Where is the lamb for burnt offering?" At the end of the story, Abraham took the lamb and offered burnt offerings on behalf of his son. This illustrates the typical burnt offering. God says to Abraham, "Take Isaac, your beloved son, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him a burnt offering from there on mountain I have told you." This is a long time after Isaac has been able to climb up to the mountain with the trees for the burnt offering. Therefore, Isaac appearing in this case seems to be unreasonable as a young man of about 20 years old. If so, Father Abraham is about 120 years old. Abraham, an old man, took the trees for the burnt offering and gave it to his son Isaac. And he took the fire and the sword and went up to the place God had told him. And there he found his son Isaac as a sacrifice. In this process, if the father and the son competed with each other, Abraham, who had already become an old man, would have lost his young son Isaac. Abraham's burnt offering could have been possible because Isaac had volunteered for Abraham and was bound himself. So in the earliest Targum, the fragment Targum, there is an interpretation that Isaac volunteered to be a sacrifice. Conclusion. The burnt offering is the most frequent priest in the Old Testament. The burnt offering, the most representative sacrament of the Old Testament, conveys some important ideas to the modern churches. The burnt offering is the most popular worship in the Old Testament. The burnt offering, the most representative sacrament of the Old Testament, conveys some important ideas to the modern churches. First, the worshiper is more important than the kind of offering. The rich devote cattle, the middle classes devote sheep or goat, while the poor devote birds. The value of birds is never lighter than the cattle, sheep, or goats. The important thing is the heart of the dedicating person. It is important to give voluntarily and with gratitude, even if you offer a bird rather than sacrificing it, even if it is expensive and big. Second, the burnt offering means to be fully devoted to God. Burning does not mean dedicate a part, but to dedicate everything entirely. The fact that Abraham sacrificed Isaac means that his future was entirely devoted to God. Third, all worship should cooperate with the preserver and the congregation. The priest alone was not able to do worship.